Okay, let's do a little bit of a recruiting roundup of the week's commitments and what they mean for the overall team rankings. And all that's coming up after the bumper.
Don't be cornering me. Hold up. Time. You gotta help me with that corner shit.
What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always college football related, sports related. We have a good time. Today, we need to talk about the latest roundup of commitments over the week, and we saw a few, right? There were like almost a dozen schools that picked up at least 2 commitments over the week, including LSU, North Carolina, even SC, I think got 2 in there. But that's kind of where I wanted to start with this, and Tennessee picking up 2 also, which means Tennessee has 24 commitments on May 23rd. You're supposed to only take 25 in a class, so I don't understand what Jeremy Pruitt expects to do with this. And when you look at where they're ranked, and I mean, cool, you got a number 2 ranking in May, but you also got a score of like 259, which is like where Penn State or Michigan might finish at number 16 in the whole thing if you were able to keep this class together. So it's not really like it's a top 25 class, but it ain't a number 2 class. Usually you need like 20 blue chippers in the boat to get a number 2 ranked class. And not only do not have 20, I only got 1 5-star, right? Like, it's not like Ohio State's class has 17 commits and is still the number 1 class by a landslide, like 40 plus points. And they got 4 5-stars in there and like 10 4-stars, right? So let's not pretend like these things are the same. And I don't think anybody has, but I just want to throw that out there. And then there's North Carolina, who's been recruiting way better than North Carolina has any right to recruit, but still looks like they might finish just outside the top 10, maybe just inside the top 10 if they land a couple of more high-profile gets. But I'm looking at the top 10, and for the first time in a very long time, we see the top 10 has at least double-digit recruits committed to each one of the schools, right? So you need 10 just to be in that top 10. Texas on the outside looking in. They'll get back up in there because that's what Texas does. SC, though, being a top 10 program right now, coming off of what was a pretty decent year, not a 5-7 year like the year previous. Now they're finally recruiting like we expect SC to recruit, because with some exceptions, SC has always been pretty decent when it comes to recruiting. They ought to finish in the top 10 with the tradition that they have and that blue blood running through their veins, and picking up top offensive talent ought to just come with the territory. But watching LSU and picking up 2 defensive commitments, one in Savion Jones, a 6'5" wide side defensive end, or weak side defensive end, and then 6'3" safety in Kari G, tells us a couple of things. One, Ed Orgeron gets who he wants. 2, that Bo Pelini is really stacking up these 5 techniques and these edge guys that have a tendency to put their hands on the ground. So that 4-3 is definitely what they're recruiting toward. And it's looking like it's going to pay off, because between Landon Jackson and Savion Jones, I mean, plus Rayshawn Davis, yeah, you got some hitters. And then you could also talk about Kari G picking up that safety spot. That kind of eliminates for me Kendall Daniels going to LSU. I mean, it's still possible, but now we're looking at a group like his Final Four included A&M, LSU, Oklahoma, and Clemson. Clemson, I still think, has an outside shot here because Brent Venables spends a whole hell of a lot of time recruiting the guys that he actually wants, and Daniels is a guy he really wants. But then A&M is trying to come on. They picked up a couple of commits, and they look pretty decent. However, seeing LSU at like number 7 in this ranking means they got an outside shot at finishing inside that number 2, number 3 spot, depending entirely on what they do at perhaps wide receiver and what they do perhaps at like offensive line, because those are 2 places where I think they could get some help. Now, JoJo Earl, tremendous pickup, right? 4-star wide receiver out of Aledo. And people were talking all about Jace McClellan. Should have been talking about JoJo. JoJo can play. And more than that, I'm looking at just the defensive stalwarts here. I mean, like, I get Deion Smith helps you tremendously, and JoJo Earl I mentioned, but you get Xavier Carter, Xavier Jones, Kari G, Dakota Mitchell, Anthony Hundley, right? And all of a sudden, you can go recruit heavily your offense. Like, this is the way that I would draw it up if I'm a recruiting coordinator. I recruit hard defensively, right? I try to get as many of my defensive commits in the boat before the summer, during the summer, so that I can just go whole hog on recruiting offensively. And if I can get a quarterback before June 1, I'm golden. And that's exactly what Ed Orgeron and LSU have done. And right now they have the number 2 ranked class in the SEC behind Tennessee, who's got literally twice as many commitments. And they're not all the quality that you would really want. If I'm a Tennessee fan, I'm going to enjoy this right now because it's not going to last for very long. Meanwhile, Clemson is still recruiting their butt off. They picked up a quarterback who I understands that he's probably going to end up Chase Bryce, which is fine, right? If DJ Uyunglele goes down, guess what? You're the next man up, and that's not a bad place to be. Problem is, if you think you're Kelly Bryant, yeah, you're probably going to end up in Missouri. And that's okay, right? That's part of college football as we know it today. But if you continue to look at the rankings and you see SC at 5, you see LSU at 6, Florida right there with 15 commits, though, at 7, and Minnesota at 8. Now, we got to talk a little bit about Minnesota, who picked up their biggest, highest rated commit in the history of the school, like last month. Now, they also got 16 commits, right? You could finish top 10, but you're going to have to really, really shoot and claw because Minnesota's at 10 with 13, Notre Dame's at 11 with 10, and Texas is at 10 or at 11 with 10. So I think really we're talking about Minnesota and Maryland competing with each other, and Maryland's at 13 right now, and Oklahoma at 27 with 7. But I wanted to speak to this whole bit about the rumor that Oklahoma's going to have a monster class. All right, let me unpack this. Oklahoma's last monster class finished 6th in the team rankings, which is really good, but it ain't number 2, it ain't number 3, right? Even in a year in which Oklahoma finished 6th in the country, Texas finished 3rd, right? Which means for me, Oklahoma's monster class would have to be at least that good, right? Would have to finish top 3, top 5 would be nice, but right now top 10 is realistic. But I don't see top 5. And I'll tell you, it's because Caleb Williams is not in the boat. Remember that when Oklahoma finished number 6, and that's with that 2019 class, Spencer Rattler was in the boat in June 2018. Now we're nearly a full year behind that schedule. And having your quarterback in the boat had a really big deal and had a lot to do with, was a really big deal when it came to Weiss committing, then decommitting, then recommitting, making sure Trajan Bridges was in the boat. R.J. Henderson at the time was a very, very big deal, right? Being able to get guys like Jamal Morris, being able to pick up dudes like E.J. Ndoma Ogar. I mean, Austin Stogner was first in, but Rattler was second in. Having your quarterback in early makes it so much easier for you to recruit and gives you an absolute leader in your recruiting. And anytime you've had a charismatic quarterback as your lead recruiter, those classes end well. It's why I think LSU does so well. It's Garrett Nussmeier, as you've heard on this channel, is very articulate, understands what he needs to do, understands what the program wants to do, and wants to help succeed. I mean, he's already leading that class after joining it in May. The longer that Williams delays his decision, whether it be Oklahoma, LSU, or Maryland, I think the worst chances Oklahoma has finishing that top 5. That said, if Oklahoma got the folks that they wanted, that would include Williams, Kamara Wheaton, LJ Johnson, Isaiah Coe. I mean, we keep going here if we're talking about a wish list. I mean, Kendall Daniels, like, there's a bunch of dudes with high quality rankings that can help you. Savion Byrd. I mean, but the idea that you're going to get them all before you get Caleb Williams, right, I think says a lot. Because there's a bunch of kids that want to play with him. Like being able to say to Emeka Egbuka, hey, we got Caleb Williams, helps tremendously, right? Now, he's still a heavy Ohio State lean. But if anybody was going to be able to pull him away from Ohio State, it'd be Oklahoma, based entirely on what Oklahoma's done the last 3-4 years. 1, you make the playoff. 2, you have the best quarterback in college football most years. And in the year where you didn't, it took Joe Burrow, passed for 5,000, 60 touchdowns, 6 picks, right? Even Jalen Hurts still finished number 2 in the Heisman voting, and we remember that. Don't break your plate, RJ. Then there's this aspect of it that is Dennis Simmons and the wide receivers there, right? Because CeeDee Lamb, Marquise Brown, D.D. Westbrook, Sterling Shepard, all Dennis Simmons guys. You have a tremendous chance of getting drafted in the first round playing wide receiver at Oklahoma. Ohio State hasn't had a first-round draft pick at wide receiver since 2007. And that's Ted Ginn Jr., who is father time ancient in the NFL, and Anthony Gonzalez, who many people forgot about, was a first-round selection, number 32 to the Colts that year. So there are a number of things that can move here, but getting your quarterback in earlier and having him be just entrenched in what you're trying to build is what it is, right? I mean, the sooner you get your quarterback, the better off you're gonna be, which is one of the reasons why we like to see the quarterbacks make their decision in, early June of the year prior. Like Preston Stone being able to announce at the All-America game that he is going to SMU, I think is a real reason as to why SMU is in a dogfight with Oklahoma for Kamara Wheaton and Savion Byrd, even as most people tell you Byrd is probably leaning toward SMU, and Wheaton can still have a choice between SMU, LSU, and Oklahoma, but he's also a 5-star tailback and the number 1 ranked tailback in this class. So he's going to have his suitors. So all of this to say there's some moving and shaking here, but for Oklahoma, you need to get the quarterback in the boat so that you can make a run at this thing. Because if it goes to August, I think, top 10, sure, fine, whatever. Top 5, I don't see it, man. I mean, something's got to give, and it's got to give sooner rather than later. All right, that's it for me. Doses.